We now proceed to the next item, which is the panel discussion, and I would like to invite His Excellency Tochi Sangha, Newton Wickramasuriya, and Gamno Silva to take their places here. And the moderator is Siddartha Khastgir.
Very good morning to all of you, and a warm welcome to all the panelists also. We have this panel discussion on the topic Mechanical Engineering Diversified. Over the past century, mechanical engineering has diversified substantially, and what we would like to discuss over here in this panel is what diversity means to each of you. And everybody coming from a diverse background has a different meaning of diversity. From the political and the diplomatic point of view, from a hardcore mechanical engineering, from a female and a young engineer, and from a local Sri Lankan perspective. I'll just give a brief introduction of how we are going to run this. Each of the panelists will have 5 to 7 minutes to speak on what they feel diversity is and what they feel mechanical engineering has diversified over the past many years. And after that, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A between the panelists over here, and then we open the discussion up for the audience. So just a brief introduction of each of the panelists. As you all know, His Excellency has been working posted in Sri Lanka for almost 3.5 years. Prior to that, he was a practicing lawyer in Scotland, and his hobbies, it seems to me, is table tennis, football, and bat golf. Mr. Tochi Sangha, a hardcore mechanical engineering person with manufacturing at his heart. So he's going to provide a very technical aspect of what he thinks about mechanical engineering over the past few years. Ruth, a building physicist, quite a new area in mechanical engineering, and how she feels this new thing is coming into mechanical engineering and why it should be the future. Newton, engineer at heart, but wants to be a photographer. That's what I learned. So he's going to provide how mechanical engineering has been perceived within Sri Lanka when he was an engineer in university and how it is right now. So I'll start with His Excellency. You have 5 to 7 minutes to put your thoughts into it.
Thank you very much indeed. So you'd like us to give our views of what diversity means to us and how it might apply to mechanical engineering. I think of diversity in 3 ways. One is the, I suppose, traditional modern way of diversity of people, and the need to provide equal opportunity to those of men and women, to those of different races, religions, and of different social backgrounds. And I think that countries, governments have become aware in recent years that this is not simply a matter of fairness, but that all organisations can benefit from having greater diversity. If, for example, I have to take a decision on the position we're going to take on some issue here in Sri Lanka, it's very easy for me to form a view based on my experience as a white, middle to older aged Brit, and consulting other people of the same background. That actually won't necessarily help me to form the best view. I rely very much on my Sri Lankan staff, for example, to assist me. I rely on my Sri Lankan staff, be they Buddhist, Hindu, Christian or Muslim, to help me to make a better informed decision. And I think the clear evidence is, for example, that having women in the boardroom helping to inform and make decisions actually leads to more effective decisions at the end of the day. There's good contemporary evidence for that. Secondly, I think of diversity in terms of countries in the world. When I started off my career, it was the period of the Cold War in Europe. One of my first jobs was to actually visit East Berlin, go across the Berlin, well, not across the Berlin Wall, but through the Berlin Wall for negotiations with East German government. And the Cold War and the sort of ideological and military battle between the West and Eastern Europe dominated what we did. That's completely changed. And we still have some competition, obviously, with Russia, and you'll be aware of current issues. But we now live in a world which, a post-Cold War world, where actually the threats in many respects are greater than they were during the Cold War period. But I think also we're very much more aware of the rise of the South, the economic importance of this region and the Asia-Pacific region, and the BRICS countries, which are now becoming huge players in the decisions that governments collectively need to take to tackle the challenges of which I spoke. And lastly, I think that I look at diversity of need. The UK worries about climate change, worries about rising sea levels. But here in this area, which is the rice growing area, and Africa, maize growing area, the effects of climate change, rising sea levels could affect certainly the Maldives and Sri Lanka, but the effect of climate change on crop yield is potentially catastrophic. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but if you look at the International Rice Institute figures, they will show you how much rice yield is likely to fall per rising degree of temperature going forward. And how does this apply to engineers and mechanical engineers? Well, I think the answer is that the solutions that different countries require to tackle their problems may be different solutions, and therefore the engineering solution needs to be take account of that diversity of need.
Thank you. I have quite a few questions based on what you said, but we'll come back to that later on. So, Mr. Sangha.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I have completed more than 50 years as member of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and what I have seen the changes that have taken place in the profession, especially on the academic side. In the 60s, the emphasis for becoming an engineer was that you got to have some kind of apprenticeship in a manufacturing company and do your academic studies, either evening courses or day release given by the companies, or pass part 1, part 2, part 3 examinations of either the Institution of Mechanical Engineers or other institutions. And most of the membership of the institution at that time really came from the practical engineers working in the manufacturing industries. There were very few engineers from the academic side who were professors, lecturers in the colleges. They were there because that was the time when university education was not so common, and very few people went for engineering degrees to become engineers. But the situation has changed dramatically. We are today, it has taken us more than 40 years to achieve what we call the status of a registered chartered engineer or an incorporated engineer. We went through the motions of Council of Engineering Institutions, Royal Commission under Lord Monty Finston, and I remember very clearly 1985 when Sir Keith Joseph was the Minister for Education, and he really forced the issue down the throat of the engineers. Because at that time the view was, no, the engineers are coming from practical side, and increasing the academic standard is going to be not very useful. But anyway, the government was convinced, and we had the Royal Commission eventually and the Royal Charter and the Engineering Council came into being. And today we have a situation that the two designations, CEng, IMechE, are easily recognizable qualifications in the English-speaking countries for professional engineers. Today you can see advertisements in the press for senior engineers. They don't have to describe requirements of bachelor's degree, 3 years experience, 4 years experience in a certain position. All they have to do is either registered as a chartered engineer or incorporated engineer or preparing for it. That's good enough. So the engineers wanted a place in the society as respectable as enjoyed by the doctors and the lawyers. The doctors and the lawyers could do with medical council and law society, whereas engineers were never together. We had institutions of civil engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and so many others. We still have, but at least under the engineering council, with higher academic standards, as you know, for a chartered engineer, you got to have an education at master's level. So I think there is a feeling within the engineering community that there has certainly more appreciation of the contribution the engineers make to the society. And I would say now, even in the society, engineers sort of giving the impression somebody in blue or khaki overalls with spanners and screwdrivers stuck in his pockets. That has changed. That has changed. And mind you, the press has also played its part. The press has also played its part, and there used to be serials on BBC TV. They will have a sort of engineer presented in a reasonably respectable role. These things have helped. And I think today we can say that we are proud to be engineers. The situation has changed from practical engineer, the academic standards have gone up, and they keep on going. And we are getting now engineers from universities, straight from universities, because more educational facilities are available. But what has happened now is this, that we are beginning to lose the, what I call the practical touch. There was a time it was very essential, even for a university graduate, to become a member, graduate member of the institution, that they were required to serve up to 18 months of graduate apprenticeship in an organized, approved scheme of the institution. We have diluted that. Some of the industries are able to manage that, but the manufacturing industries especially have started raising their voice again, that we are getting graduates into industry who are, strictly speaking, not employable straight away. We have to train them. And this position is much more in our own countries, in India, in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh. And I hope that the profession will realize this one, and through its forum sort of bring this idea back that practical training is equally important along with higher academic standards. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tochi, on that brief history on everything, how you've been exchanging. So now over to Ruth, presenting more of a young member's perspective and a female engineer's perspective on this subject.
Thank you. I have a number of very separate points that I would like to make, and this is very much from my experience. I live and work in London, so I don't have a lot of experience of Southern Asia, so this will be very much a personal experience. The first thing I want to talk about is the massive growth in digital communication. When I first decided I wanted to be an engineer, the internet didn't really exist. It probably existed in a laboratory somewhere, but it certainly didn't exist for the likes of you and me. By the time I joined university to study my engineering degree, it was commonplace. Most people had access to the internet, but only through a computer, probably a pretty sizable computer. Now, I carry this with me everywhere. I can access the entire world through this tiny phone. And from a diversity point of view, that means that I can do my job from anywhere in the world. I could sit in this hotel, do my job, talk to my colleagues all over the world, and access more information than any of us know what to do with. And I think that's an absolutely massive, massive change just in my lifetime. And I'm obviously a fair bit younger than the rest of the panel here. And I think that presents a huge amount of opportunity for us as engineers.
That's an advantage.
I do consult books and I work with my colleagues, but when I face a problem, I do a lot of computational modelling in my career. I will talk to the colleagues that sit around me, and I'll ask the world for the answer. And I think that's incredible, an incredible opportunity. The second thing I'd like to talk about is my industry. I work in the construction industry. I help architects design buildings. And when I started my career, when I joined the company that I joined, the structural engineer was king. Particularly in Asia and the Middle East, it was a race to the sky. Who can make the tallest building? Every year somebody was making a taller and taller building, and that was really incredible challenges for the structural engineers. That has changed, again, in the short time that I've been working. The mechanical engineer now leads the design in most cases. In the UK, buildings use 30% of the energy, and the need for sustainability and the need to reduce our carbon footprint means that the mechanical engineer and someone like myself who is able to design buildings that are passive, and I work around the world, I do a lot of work in the Middle East, design buildings that use less energy, choosing appropriate materials, and choosing appropriate technologies, and to be able to quantify the energy use of buildings, that's now the leading driver. So my industry is diversified in the time that I've worked here. The third thing I'd like to talk about is what is mechanical engineering? I'm a member of the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. I'm a chartered engineer, and I chose to join the Institute of Mechanical Engineers over the other institutions that have been mentioned. But I work as part of a multidisciplinary team, and I'd say the lines are pretty blurred now between what is a mechanical engineer, what is a structural engineer, what is an electrical engineer. There are new disciplines coming out. Biomedical engineering is growing at tremendous rates, and to do that we need all the engineers to work together. So I would say our entire profession is diversifying, and I do call myself a mechanical engineer, but I don't really see the boundaries between the different sectors in engineering that we perhaps once had. And the final thing I've been asked to talk about, and it makes me sad that I'm still asked to talk about, is the fact that I am a girl, and I'm a girl in engineering, and we are still in the minority, but in my experience, I've been treated the same as everybody else, I'm paid the same as everybody else, and where I work, it's never mentioned. And I think it is unfortunate that we still do feel the need to talk about the fact that our profession is not as diverse as it perhaps could be. And I have a slight personal plea. It is, when you're a young engineer or a student considering engineering, if you're a guy or a young boy and you say you want to go into engineering, people go, oh great, what sort of engineering would you like to do? If you're a girl and you say, I'd like a career in engineering, people go, oh, isn't that unusual? Good on you. That is the most off-putting thing someone can say to you. So next time someone comes up to you and says, I'm a girl in engineering, or I want to consider engineering, say, that's interesting. What sort of engineering would you like to do? And maybe our profession will become a bit more diverse.
Thought-provoking thing, at least for us, part of the world where female engineers is highly in the minority. So I'll put on Newton now, because now we can talk about especially our part of the world from the local perspective. So it's a very timely thing for you now.
Okay, thank you, Siddartha. Well, I really don't know where to begin. Okay, as Maria said in Sound of Music, let's start at the very beginning. Well, at the time I started, I wanted to become an engineer. I distinctly wanted to be a mechanical engineer. at that time, if you take in Sri Lankan context or Sri Lanka, we had a state-controlled economy, and most of the heavy industries were in the hands of the state, and that also was a blessing in disguise at that time, because the engineers had ample opportunity to be trained. Then over a period of time, when we shifted to market economy, it so happened that it was not viable to, or rather the private sector did not have the financial capability to run large industries. So gradually emphasis shifted to light engineering. And that, of course, was not an advantageous situation for specialty mechanical engineering. Okay, and then on top of it, right now people always talk about the outcome-based engineering as against the hands-on based engineering. And then the question is, okay, are we taking the path of outcome-based engineering, or are we going to take the path of the hands-on based engineering? As was mentioned earlier, what exactly do you want from an engineer? Now that's the question that has to be answered. I suppose the outcome-based engineering concept came because of that. Right. I think that varies from country to country, society to society. As I said, in a small country like ours, especially Sri Lanka, where the industrial base is not that strong, there is a tendency to migrate for the engineers to migrate from one sector to the other, sometimes to management areas as well. And also, then we also have a scenario developing. Now, whether an engineer, once qualified, maybe you after getting a degree from university, is it necessary for you to become a professional engineer by joining an institution? Now we are, even at the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, we are having this situation where the engineers who pass out from university, they think, okay, that's the end of the road as far as the professionalism is concerned, because the employers are not particular. Now say for instance, even if I go through the professional engineering journal of the IMechE, there's so many pages of advertisement, you don't find any advertisement requiring for a chartered engineer. And the basic qualification required is a university degree. Now, how did this come up? Why are we facing a situation like this? Because for an engineer, it is absolutely necessary to know the fundamentals and the hands-on experience. But what made us to, as engineers, to change this emphasis? Just because there was no need to emphasize professionalism in our profession. And need for implement professionalism does not come voluntarily. It has to be implemented. Now, say for instance, if you take medical profession, they are governed by the medical ordinance. There's a registration process, there's a evaluation process, and they are recognized. When it comes to engineering, there is no such thing. So there is no yardstick even for an employer to assess the competence of an engineer. Okay, we talk about being a chartered engineer in Sri Lanka as well as in UK, but that does not become, it's not mandated. So even if you are to implement the ethics, professional ethics, or for instance, even if an engineer is found to be, at fault with something, or he had violated the ethics, what can the institution, even the IMechE do? Okay, we can remove him from the roster, but does it prevent him from practicing elsewhere? Because no employer needs or insists on having a professional qualification. I think this is the system that is being practiced. As far as Sri Lanka is concerned, that we find, as I said, since we do not have a firm or a strong industrial base, and we find that the graduate engineers shifting to other fields. We find there are bankers, there are even advertising agents, and fortunately not professionals. Sorry, photographers, as Siddartha said. Of course, I engage in photography as a hobby. I think the need of the hour, in my opinion, is to have a rationalized approach to engineering, where everybody knows where we stand. I think that's my opinion.
So, yes, okay. Thanks a lot, Newton. I sense many strands over here just lying about diversity, and by the end of the discussion, I would like to tie them all up together. And so I'll open the panel to quick Q&A among yourselves first. I have a few for all of you, so I'll let you initiate the question.
In fact, rather than asking a question, I'm tempted to respond to the point which Newton has raised, especially about the some sort of regulation on the engineering profession and the requirement by the industry. See, this, if I think I'm allowed, I would like to expand on this theme. This is not a new problem. In fact, when the Royal Commission report of Lord Shilston was being implemented, the question was, what should be the route? The most, at that time, perhaps appropriate route would have been an Act of Parliament to make the Engineering Council. Because the British Medical Council and Law Society have been formed by an Act of Parliament. But the government decided against that one. The reason was that they thought, as far as the doctors and lawyers are concerned, they have direct contact with the public. And by legislation, the public has to be protected. Whereas the engineers are concerned, there were two problems. One is the engineering profession was very, very diversified. There were different opinions, and neither the government wanted it nor the profession wanted it, that it should be seen that as if this new system is being imposed on the engineering profession by law. And they found another way. That was the Royal Charter by which the Engineering Council was formed. And the government maintained that it will not be practical to enforce the registration like doctors for the engineers, because the word engineer is so common in the society, it's going to be a very difficult situation. So it remained that way. But Whereas what is happening is, in our countries, for example, I give you example of India. It's not that this need has not been felt. The need has been felt by the profession for a long time. In fact, there is a draft legislation pending with the government of India for the last 7 years, which was prepared by the engineering profession, that the profession has to be regulated and there has to be protection of the society from wrong engineering or wrong engineers. So hopefully, I think that, so basically if that happens, I'm sure that that's not going to go unnoticed. Other countries will perhaps come up with that kind of legislation also. And the other point which Newton has mentioned about the sort of...
I'd like to just interrupt to review a bit faster,
Okay.
but we can shift on to the other side of the discussion.
Okay. Anyway, as far as the employment is concerned, the advertisements are concerned, basically the whole process has shifted. Most of the employment sort of recruitment has gone to the headhunters and recruitment agencies. They do their own things. So you don't really see much of advertisement in the professional engineering magazine, which is of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers.
Thank you. Thanks for speaking your heart out. Just throw out a disclaimer over here that everybody who's speaking is speaking his personal view and not any particular government view. And especially for His Excellency, I want you to speak as a father of a son who's an engineer rather than a diplomat.
Okay.
Okay. So, any questions within the panel, or should I have a few for you.
Just if I may, a very quick comment from me. I was comforted by what Ruth said about the distinctions between the different branches of engineering, because in thinking about what I might say this morning, I thought I'd better check my own understanding of the fields that mechanical engineering covered, and so I went to that well-known primary source, Wikipedia, and it starts off with a lovely illustration of Archimedes' screw, but it goes on to describe those areas of biomedical engineering, nanotechnology, and the cross-links between mechanical, civil, electrical, chemical engineering. I came to the conclusion that I sort of knew where mechanical engineering had started from, but where it is now struck me as being actually a very diverse field in its own right.
So my question to Ruth was, see this about the attitude of the society to the girls taking up engineering. Fortunately, I would say in this part of the world, the attitude is quite encouraging and favorable. And it's not very uncommon these days that you are seeing many more in large percentage that girls are taking up engineering. I think maybe perhaps see some of the things which you have mentioned, the softer part of engineering is now obviously much more appealing than the sort of the hard life on the shop floor, which they may never face because there are so many other opportunities in the field of engineering. And
I would respond to that by saying where I work, I'm the only female engineer in the softer side, and there's about 10 engineers that are female on the shop floor. So I would
very good.
I'd counter that. There are no barriers to anything these days. The barriers are just in our heads, or in everyone's heads. So yeah, I know women who would hate my job and would much rather be on the shop floor.
Because there has been this global campaign about the he for she that's being launched by the UN, by Emma Watson. So there is a feeling that women are right now not treated by the society equally. So there has to be a thing that the government is putting forward, some kind of scheme maybe. So if you could elaborate a bit on if something is being planned like that, like the UN has planned with Emma Watson as their brand ambassador for that. And who owns the onus of doing this, bringing out this change, especially in this part of the world?
Let me give you a personal view. It may not differ too much, I suppose, from what my government's view would be, but my personal view is certainly governments have a responsibility to legislate against discrimination. on non-objective or discrimination which is not objective or merited. So I think governments should legislate against discrimination on grounds of sex, race, religion, sexual orientation. And that's a basic principle of fairness. I am not myself in favour of mandatory quotas, but I think that the best incentive beyond enforcing legislation for non-discrimination is to go back to the point I tried to make earlier, for businesses and organisations to realise that they will be better performing organisations if they do not discriminate and select and promote people on merit. And therefore there needs to be, I think there already has been, but there needs to be that further understanding that it is in the self-interest of the organisation to change. This can be scary. In my organisation, at the senior levels of my Foreign Office, I suspect in many foreign offices, it has tended to be pretty male oriented, and our foreign services, traditionally recruited from perhaps rather traditional universities. I'm glad to see we're changing. We've become much more diverse in terms of background, race, disabled persons, gay people, gender balance. This can feel slightly threatening if you happen to come from the traditional, well, to some extent the traditional background. My background wouldn't be entirely typical of Foreign Office recruitment. But I think that if you can accept that that is in the wider interest of the organisation as a whole, if it will make you a better Foreign Office, if it will make you a better government, if it will make you a better engineering company, then that's going to be the fundamental incentive for further change in this area.
So if I get you right, you're trying to put the onus back on the companies rather than the government taking the lead.
I think governments should legislate against discrimination, and that in itself is an incentive for companies who wish to obey the law. But I think to get through that further glass ceiling in various areas, well, A, the individuals moving up have to prove they can do it, but B, I think organisations, companies need to realise this is in their commercial self-interest.
See, I think that in our countries we have got an easier way for this one. This is but the sort of way of reservations, that you got to reserve so many places for the certain communities as well as certain number of places for the girl engineers also. I think that it will come. It will come, and it seems that maybe perhaps that is the easiest and the quickest solution.
Okay, but that moves away from a meritocracy a bit, and that's something that we don't like. Newton has something to do.
Well, yes, I think initially in Sri Lanka also we had this, not a restriction, but people were reluctant, especially girls were reluctant to take up to mechanical engineering. I think mainly not because of any discrimination, but okay, mechanical engineering is perceived to be a little bit of heavy, on the heavy side. So it was considered that, the ladies or girls would not be able to handle heavy engineering. And then, ironically, I remember that long ago, at least during my time, there was this bright girl who wanted to do mechanical engineering. So my professor said, I don't think it's a suitable job for you. But she insisted on doing that. She did it brilliantly, and today she is a vice chancellor of a Canadian university. So, and also talk about Sri Lanka is concerned, right now, there is absolutely no hesitation. There are quite a lot of girls taking up to mechanical engineering. And I must also say that employers also have no reluctance in employment.
And also promoting them to the boardroom, because I see very little people, very little female engineers at the boardroom level. Because I was I saw a BBC television interview between Linda Yu at the World Economic Forum, between Carlos Ghosh and Christine Lagarde and everybody. And they did mention that there's a huge shortage of women at the boardroom level. I'm not talking about at the middle management or the entry level, but at the boardroom level, it's a really acute shortage. And sometimes it's just to do with the mindset of the companies or the bigger companies itself. So how do you see that? Is it changing within? What's the situation in Sri Lanka at the boardroom level?
No, I don't think there is anything special for Sri Lanka. I suppose what goes on all over the world will be the same.
It's not many women in the boardrooms of the senior companies here.
Okay.
Well, it's not happening so much in engineering, but as far as, especially in India, as far as other fields are concerned, like banking especially, and banking, insurance, and also some very large manufacturing units in pharmaceutical industries, even in manufacturing industry. But of course, they had the advantage to start with, because they belong to the families which are controlling interest in the companies. But we certainly see in the large public sector banks in India that high percentage of ladies as chairman, managing directors of the companies.
Okay, I think I'll just shift on to the other strand of diversity now. It's too much of this side. I think I'll pick up on something that His Excellency and Ruth mentioned, that mechanical engineering is not the old kind of mechanical engineering anymore. So within mechanical engineering, we have like electrical coming into it, making it mechatronics and electronics. So from the views of the panel, what would you prefer? Keeping mechanical as mechanical, or diversifying itself and getting more people in? And especially Ruth, would you prefer being a mechanical engineer in the 60s, or would you prefer being a mechanical engineer today?
I would definitely prefer today. Yesterday we had the Speak Out for Engineering competition, and the person who won works with trains. Now trains, we're pretty happy with that. That sits in mechanical engineering. I think it might be the biggest industry within the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. In my view, the solution that had been presented was actually a little piece of electrical engineering. Actually, I was given a little electronic circuit. I'm an engineer. In the team that I work with mathematicians who do my job. I work with physics and architect students who do my job. I work with engineers who do my job. And the engineers come from an aerospace background, a civil engineering background, and a mechanical engineering background. And they all do the job that I do. It's just different types of degree level education, and it's the choice they made at 18 that means they chose to do an aerospace degree and have now ended up designing buildings. So I think these barriers are falling down, and we are the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, and there is a lot of discussion about whether we should merge with other institutions, and there are a whole realm of politics that I think it makes it very challenging to do that. But when I introduce myself outside of the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, I just say I'm an engineer. I don't distinguish what type.
Yeah, I think Siddartha, that's purely individualistic approach. Because now, say for instance, I am a head of a large manufacturing organization in this country. I don't want my mechanical engineers to be, straight-jacketed and to be restricted to a particular area. I certainly would like them to move around and have a certain amount of specialization or other skills in different aspects as well. Because, say for instance, nowadays, mechatronics, controlling systems and so on, it becomes a part and parcel of your life. So you have to be familiar with it. And also I said it depends on the organization. There may be organizations which have a particular approach or a specialized area. So in that, if a person gets involved in that, naturally he will be restricted to that area of operation. I think it is purely depending on it depends on the organization.
Okay, I'll take up, you have a point? I'll take up a point that Tochi raised, especially for India, that graduates out of the university are not directly employable because of lack of hands-on knowledge. So how do you feel that, as in when you're shifting from traditional mechanical engineering to this more softer aspect being incorporated within mechanical engineering, is that hampering the students in a way, since they're not directly employable? Or what's your take on that?
See, first of all, I mean, the other point which we were discussing, I briefly touch on that before I come to this issue, that, see, when in the initial stages, I sort of highlighted the need of practical aspects of mechanical engineering. My emphasis was not that it has to be only hardcore mechanical engineering. In fact, mechanical engineering has expanded so much, even within the institution. As we know, we take care of environment, education, transport, energy, engineering, and these aspects. And even within the normal sort of detailed work for academic requirements, etc., we have got about 23, 24 different kinds of degrees which cover various aspects of mechanical engineering. Because the situation is this one, the world, no human activity can get away from mechanical engineering. The biggest small item, a part of engineering, the screw, just imagine a screw. Can any industry get away from that aspect? No. So I think mechanical engineering is getting wider and wider, and of course it is getting more sophisticated, and high academic requirements are necessary. So that's really happening. Now, coming to the Indian side or the position of the graduate engineers, traditionally it is found that the Indian students are very strong on theory. They work very hard. They are very good at the knowledge they acquire from the books. And when it comes to the application of that knowledge, they don't come up to the requirements of the industry or other fields. And there, I would say, I don't blame either the universities entirely or the students. I think the industries are also to blame. And this is an issue, it goes back again into decades. Industry blaming the universities that they are not producing the right kind of graduates, and universities blaming the industry that they are not playing their part. They are not giving opportunities. And I think that situation is changing. The situation is changing, and there is more and more participation between the industry, manufacturing industries, and the higher institutes of learning. It is happening, and I think in due course of time we will see better results.
Thank you, and I very much agree with that last point. I think that I can only speak of my son's experience, but I think that universities in the UK are now very keen to get the balance right, both between the academic learning and the essential knowledge of mathematics and physics, but also practical learning as well. And therefore my son's course, it involves both book learning and doing it practically, and students are also involved in placements with industry during their degree. So my son last summer had a placement with BP in Aberdeen. I think it was a great growing up experience for him. Actually having to get up and report for work at 8:30 in the morning and work a full day, make sure his shoes were polished. But it was also a very good practical experience. And therefore, hopefully, he will graduate with the sort of skills which are better suited to what the employer needs with the academic demands and the practical demands of engineering. So I have no first-hand knowledge of how it is in India, but I would have hoped that would increasingly be the trend in all of our countries, and not just for engineers. It's also true for lawyers and doctors, that you don't just sit in the lecture hall receiving wisdom and then regurgitating it. You actually learn during your degree course how to work with people, how to apply what you're learning through the books.
I would say we're also missing the third aspect of this, which is the ability to come out with soft skills. So university, as far as I'm concerned, proves that you have the ability to learn something. There are very few engineering degrees which will specifically train you for a particular engineering job. And I would challenge any there may be 1 or 2 18-year-olds who know what they want to do with their lives. I think there are very, very few who at 18 know exactly what they want to do with their lives. So putting an 18-year-old on through an engineering degree that was specifically tailored to design a Rolls-Royce engine, or specifically tailored to design a building, would probably set someone on the wrong path. So what engineering degrees do is teach you how to learn engineering. And a good engineering degree teaches you how to learn the maths and physics and science behind engineering. It teaches you how to get your hands dirty and build something and fix a problem. It teaches you how to solve problems generally, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what differentiates us from the mathematicians and scientists. And good engineers come out with the ability to talk to clients, give a presentation. That's what university needs to do. So if industry feels that the engineers coming out aren't able to do the job, I think industry needs to take the skills that engineering degrees are giving these students and then teach them how to do the job, because I don't really think that's the job of universities.
It's a bit short.
I have a slightly different view. Of course, it's pure from Sri Lankan point of view. In our country, we have a free education system, and state universities are also free. And naturally, the brightest of the brightest get into the engineering stream. So it so happens that the people just get pushed into that stream, not because they wanted to do engineering, or nor do they have the aptitude to do it. So, and this question of what you asked at the beginning, I think that's a question that had been ringing for the last so many years. I think it will continue to do so. I remember during my time, even by the time we passed out, our senior engineers said, "You guys, you know only applied mathematics, and no hands-on experience." Certainly not. So we did much better than some of these senior engineers. But my point of view is that it depends on the individual. If you have the aptitude, and if you have the aptitude to grasp what is being taught and how to translate the theory into practical application, that's where the crux of the matter is. In my opinion, it's purely dependent on the individual. And also as an employer, I'm proud to say we never made a mistake. When we interviewed the engineer and recruited him, we made sure that it was the right choice. So, as I said, it depends on the aptitude of the person and whether his ability or whether he wants to do that. And also dependent on the employer to